Now for the AFEX commodities update. The AFEX market, the week ended September 13th, saw the total value traded up by 34.95 factors. Number of contracts and deals were also up from the previous week. We have Michael Martin, portfolio manager at AFEX, to tell us more. Great to have you, Michael. First, bring us up to speed with activities in the market for the week under review.
Thank you very much, Laddie. It is always a pleasure to be here. So just to give you a summary of what happened on the exchange in the week under review, the total value of transactions traded on the exchange went up by a factor of 34.95, from 102 million to close the trading week at 3.67 billion. The total number of contracts traded on the exchange also went up by a factor of 50.76, from 3,569 contracts to close the trading week at over 184,000 contracts. The total number of deals also went up slightly by 5.88%, from 17 deals last week to close the trading week at 18 deals. The AFEX Commodities Index, which is the ACI, remained unchanged at 427.34 points, and the AFEX Export Index, which is the AEI, also remained unchanged at 168.08 points. With regards to the volume of contracts traded on the exchange in the week under review, there was a general increase across board, with the major corporates being Maize, which traded up from 45 contracts to close the trading week at 184,404 contracts. We, however, saw a massive decline in the volume of contracts traded for soybean, which traded from 2,225 contracts last week to close the trading week at just 299 contracts. There was little to no volume traded across board for the remaining commodities on the exchange. With regards to the price changes on the exchange, we generally saw a decline, with the major corporate being cocoa, which fell by 6.56%, losing 6,402 naira in the contract value, to close the trading week at 97,637 naira per contract. We also saw a decline in the price of paddy rice, which fell by 3.95%, losing 877 naira in the contract value to close the trading week at 21,318 naira per contract. And last but certainly not least, we saw a decline in the price of soybean, which fell by 1.76%, losing 611 naira in the contract value to close the trading week at 34,053 naira per contract. And so that's by and large all of what happened on the exchange in the week under review. And as we always say, if you want to know more about the commodities market, you can go to our website, which is www.afexnigeria.com. And if you want to get started trading commodities, you can always download our app, which is available on iOS and also on Android.
All right, Michael. Well, just this morning, the NBS released the August inflation data, and it still shows, of course, inflation is still trending downwards, albeit at a slower pace. And we have seen food inflation trending lower. What's the correlation? I mean, how do you link this data to what your activities at the exchange?
So thank you very much, Chimeze, for that question. I think the inflation data is representative of what is currently going on in the commodities market. As represented in the data I just presented a couple of minutes ago, commodity prices are generally falling across board. I believe it was the same scenario that we saw play out last week and even in recent weeks. So I believe a lot of that is also currently being reflected in the inflation numbers that we are seeing, with the inflation numbers tapering to close for this month at 17.04%. I think that trend will generally continue for the coming months, and like I said, that's symptomatic of what we currently have playing out in the commodities market.
All right, Michael, we know there isn't a lot going on in the local commodities market, but can you give us an overview of what's happening in international market, especially as it concerns grains?
So thank you very much, Laddie. So in recent months, so according to a USDA report, particularly for the month of July, it was indicated that there might be a bit of an issue with the production numbers, particularly for this year. And that's partly due to the fact that we have had droughts and wildfires in the western part of the United States. So what this essentially caused in the market was that it essentially caused a rally in the price of corn and soybean futures. It is also the case that we have seen flooding in major parts of Europe, which have also affected the price of wheat futures in the commodities futures market. But but recent reports, particularly with the one that we had in the month of September, which ideally indicates all of what happened in the month of August, indicated that due to an increase in the number of hectareage cultivated this season, that might serve to temper the effect of the price rally that we have seen in recent months. So generally, those are some of the price dynamics that we have seen play out in the international market over recent months.
Now, well, back here, we have seen a major challenge in the foreign exchange market. Currently, we're seeing what is happening at the parallel market with the Naira declining further. So how are the players in your market trading this recent development in the currency market?
So thank you very much for that question. And I think your question is particularly important. But I believe it's also the case that due to the fact that the commodities market is not currently in season, we are not seeing a lot of that effect on commodity prices. Where we might be seeing a lot of that effect is with the onset of the new commodity season. So the current exchange rate might indicate to a large extent where prices would be more than willing to start from when commodities are eventually harvested into the market. So we are looking. We don't particularly know yet. We can't say by any definitive measure what the effect of the exchange rate is going to be. We would have to wait for the production numbers and then look at how prices start at the beginning of the season to just sort of estimate how far prices would go over the entire commodity season. With regards to the players within the commodities value chain, we have mentioned how there is a strong correlation between the exchange rate and also prices on the commodities market. And I think right now it's incumbent on them to really plan out their procurement over the course of the entire commodity season and essentially take advantage of commodity prices when they are at their lowest, which is what ideally they should be doing in any given commodity season. But I think it's far more important for this commodity season than any other due to what is going on in the exchange rate market.
All right, Michael, thank you so much for that update. Now we'll be heading on to our next conversation, still on the AFEX market. Meanwhile, acute food insecurity has been on the increase. Nearly 750 million people worldwide were food insecure in 2019, and at least 121 million people were moved into similar risk categories as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. This number is predicted to rise as a result of the effect of climate change on global food systems and crop production. Without adaptation, climate change might reduce agricultural yields by 5 to 30% globally by 2050. And if declining supplies result in price increases, at least 50 million additional people could face food insecurity. A viable commodities exchange may be critical in assisting smallholder farmers in adapting to and mitigating, some of the impacts, enabling them to make educated decisions and adjust conventional practices to reduce losses. So we have Oluwafuto Olasimo, Vice President, AFEX Financial Market, to give us more details on that. Great to have you on the program. Good morning.
Good to be here.
Good morning.
How's it going?
Very well, thank you.
Great.
Yeah, so, what are the main challenges in Nigeria as regards, access to finance, price discovery, and, storage for smallholder farmers? These are, constraints, at the moment, but how can your, exchange help, providing solutions for these problems?
Okay, so thank you very much for the question. And again, it's always a pleasure coming on the program. Let me start by saying that commodities exchanges have proven to be effective institutional mechanism for enhancing the efficiency and the competitiveness within the agricultural space. Having said that, a number of challenges faced by smallholder farmers that commodities exchanges like AFEX would typically address or help resolve would be number one, price discovery. Price discovery pretty much talk about the market prices of commodities in response to demand and supply dynamics. Without a commodities exchange, most smallholder farmers are pretty much exposed to middlemen and they are forced to sell because of desperation for cash, because that is the only means of livelihood that they have. But with a commodities exchange in place, it creates a marketplace for the smallholder farmers, and the smallholder farmer is able to get fair value for their produce, and they are better off for it at the end of the day. There's also the risk perspective. Again, we can't overemphasize the risk perceived risk inherent in agriculture.
Right.
A commodities exchange help to de-risk that sector by creating and introducing innovative products like derivatives.
And there's also an issue right now with cocoa, with high, rainfall in some parts of Nigeria. How can your exchange actually help with this kind of situation?
So again, when you talk about it's a ripple effect kind of issue. It's not something that started now. When you talk of this cocoa issue, there's storage, there's access to market, there's also how are the qualities of this cocoa that are presented to the market. What the exchange helps to do is to ensure that, number one, these right standards are produced, and then they match the buyers to the sellers, and then they're able to get fair value for their exchanges. And for smallholder farmers who are not looking at selling in the immediate, they exchange can provide storage facilities for them, thereby allowing them convert their cocoa from physical commodities into electronic warehouse receipts, and then they can hold for when they feel that it's a decent time for them to sell, and they of course get better return for their investment.
Okay, let's look at the country's entire, food security issue. I mean, we know Nigeria in particular, okay, we know the issues we have when we talk about food security or food insecurity, the flood issues, the insecurity in the country. Yeah. Now, how important is it to develop a commodity exchange in helping with dealing with that?
So again, the commodities exchange is really important. If you look at the contribution of agriculture to the GDP and to the growth of the economy, you would see that we currently contribute about a quarter to the general GDP. Without the commodities exchange, what the commodities exchange essentially do is to help coordinate the largely fragmented agricultural sector that we have. I talked about creating innovative products that de-risk the market, and some of them are the derivative instrument. Derivatives are price management tool that producers and processors of commodities can use in hedging their prices. When they're able to buy into derivative products, it helps with their planning, it helps with cost of procurement, it helps even the profitability of their bottom line. And of course, I talked earlier about the price discovery. A lot of times, the middlemen that play in the commodities market do not really add much value to the value chain. So a commodities exchange in place would ensure that there's fair value across all the players within the industry. In addition to that, most of the smallholder farmers are not within an integrated value chain, and that exposes a lot of them to losses, to not being post-harvest losses, and not, of course, getting the best value for their produce. A commodities exchange is able to bring all these smallholder farmers who make up about 90% of the food being produced in the country. Bringing them within that ecosystem would ensure that once they get fair value for their produce, there's incentive to go back the next season and produce more. There's also market data. Market data is very critical. A lot of reason why agri sector is not getting the much needed fund is because people don't know what's going on. They don't know what's the volume being produced, what's the volume being traded, what is the yield, what are the returns. With the commodities exchange, you can have access to data. Investors who are interested in diversifying their portfolio can then take an holistic look at that data and then make informed decision. And then you can have that much needed fund that is within the financial market flow to the commodities market. And of course, it would result in development of infrastructures. Right. And again, you can't run an effective commodities exchange without storage infrastructures, without proper broad networks to connect the farmers from where they are producing the commodities to where they would eventually store them and to where the off-takers will ultimately pick the commodities from. So again, market data is very important. It is important we develop the commodities exchange for the sake of market data, for the sake of price discovery, for the sake of de-risking the sector, and even from a policy and regulatory perspective. If the government is going to bring in an intervention, how would they know which sector or which subsector of the agri space needs the intervention? How would they know what volume? government have been doing a lot in rice, but rice is not the only commodities. So it's just due to lack of a functional commodities exchange. But again, with the advent of AFEX coming into place, we're seeing a number of these challenges go away. And over time, the space will be more competitive. At the end of the day, the final consumer is better off for it because you are then able to pay lesser for the food you're consuming.
All right.
All right.
Thank you very much for your time with us today. Time is not always our friend, basically. Okay, we take a moment. We'll be back.